America is the greatest democracy on earth, financially. No one spends more on it, therefore you must love it the most. That's the rule of any good absent father. And yet for all the money we spend on elections, every US election is the same. They all end in exactly the same way, with just under 50% of the American population absolutely devastated. That is, whichever party wins, that's the one thing you can rely on, that just under half the country will be going, shit, this country is I am moving up to Canada. Just kidding, I would never actually do that. I'm just trying to demonstrate how upset I am, and I immediately take that back. I will not even visit Canada. I'm not interested in what they're doing, those maple sugar maniacs.
Voting has long been dressed up as the sacred ritual where the voice of the people shapes the destiny of a nation. It's a beautiful notion, almost poetic. And yet the truth is that Americans have a profoundly complicated relationship with voting, elections, and campaigns. In the 21st century, campaigns don't really end. They merely shift gears, keeping us in a perpetual state of political warfare. Elections are competitive, they are contentious, but rarely do they feel cathartic. Too many Americans, weighed down by cynicism or systemic barriers, simply elect to stay home rather than cast a ballot. Meanwhile, voting itself has been clouded with disillusionment and drowned in moneyed interests. Our elections have become a battlefield of sound bites and finely tuned online targeting. Political consultants flood us with ads on television, in our social feeds, even in our text messages. Every imaginable tool is deployed to secure enough votes to claim victory. Yet despite all the noise and manipulation, despite the relentless campaigns and the corrosive influence of money, voting remains the greatest tool we possess for real, tangible change. It is imperfect, exhausting, often ugly, but it is still power by design. When we look at who actually participates in democracy, it's clear that voting has never been evenly distributed. It's more than individual choice or apathy. It's a behavior shaped by history, access, and habit. The electorate is stratified. Older citizens wield outsized influence simply because they show up consistently. Income and education widen the gap further. Privilege makes voting easier. Race and ethnicity add yet another layer, reflecting centuries of disenfranchisement and structural barriers. While some of these gaps have narrowed, they've never closed entirely. In America, the question of who votes is inseparable from the question of who holds power, because turnout is never just turnout. It's the visible scar of the fight over belonging and influence in a democracy that promises equality, but delivers it unevenly. Age is one of the most defining factors in American voting patterns. There's a massive turnout gap between seniors and younger voters. Those 65 and older consistently dominate the electorate, while 18 to 29-year-olds lag far behind. This isn't because younger voters are apathetic. It's because habits take time to form. Older voters have decades of participation behind them, and they've built a routine around civic engagement. Meanwhile, young people are just stepping into political life, often moving frequently from school or work, facing registration hurdles and navigating a system that doesn't make it easy to establish the habit of voting. The result is a political landscape where older voices echo louder, shaping policies and priorities that younger generations must live with long after ballots are cast. So the story goes that young people don't vote. They're disinterested, they're detached, lost in their screens. But that's a lazy caricature. The truth is that voting is a habit forged through time and experience. Young people are still building that muscle, constantly moving for school or jobs. They face a minefield of registration rules that can knock them off the rolls. They're told politics doesn't impact them, even as policy shapes their future. And while it's easy to say they don't care, what's closer to the truth is that they haven't yet been given consistent reason to believe that their participation matters. Obstacles, structural and cultural, make voting harder for them. Their low turnout is less a shrug and more a symptom of a democracy that hasn't fully welcomed them in.
Dear young people,
don't vote.
Don't vote.
Everything's fine the way it is.
Trump. That was us.
He's our guy.
Tax cuts for the rich? Hell yeah. I'm rich as fuck.
Climate change? That's a you problem. I'll be dead soon.
sure, school shootings are sad.
But I haven't been in a school for 50 years.
I can't keep track of which lives matter.
Sure you don't like it.
So, you'll like some meme on Instagram.
If the weather is nice, maybe you could go to one of those little marches.
You might even share this video on Facebook.
But you won't vote.
You young people never do.
But I do.
I do.
I do.
Midterms, primaries.
Every single election.
We'll be there, but you won't.
Because we're a generation of doers.
Not whiners.
And we're doing great.
Gender has been a quiet but steady force shaping American elections. Since 1984, women have consistently voted at slightly higher rates than men. This is a 4-decade-long reality that politicians ignore at their peril. Women's participation has altered political strategies, campaign messaging, and even party platforms. From local races to presidential contests, women have proven to be a decisive bloc. And yet, while turnout rates show women leading, the story beneath it is more nuanced. Differences in policy preferences, partisanship, and the issues that mobilize women versus men have created one of the most enduring gaps in electoral politics. Women have been the backbone of American electoral participation for decades. Studies suggest that women often feel a stronger sense of civic duty than men, treating voting not as an occasional act, but as a responsibility tied to community and family well-being. Women are deeply embedded in social and civic networks that actively encourage participation, creating an environment where staying home feels like letting the community down. Longevity also plays a role. Because women live longer, they make up a larger share of that high turnout senior population. Taken together, these factors mean that women consistently show up, and when they do, they shape elections, push issues to the forefront, and redefine what political power looks like. Money buys comfort, sure, but it also buys access and opportunity. And voting is no exception. Higher income earners vote at far greater rates than those struggling to make ends meet. It's not because wealthier citizens care more about democracy. It's because participating in elections is easier when you don't have to choose between a paycheck and a polling place. People with more money can afford time off work, have reliable transportation, and face fewer bureaucratic hurdles. Income also ties closely to education and social networks, which further increase political engagement. The result is a system where the voices of the wealthy echo louder in the halls of power, while those living paycheck to paycheck struggle to be heard at all. When you have money, politics moves differently for you. Voting becomes more accessible. You can take time off work, afford transportation, and navigate the system without it becoming a burden. Higher income doesn't just correlate with education, it builds social networks where political engagement is expected. Wealth also heightens the sense that government policies directly affect your assets and opportunities, making participation feel urgent. People with money aren't necessarily more civic minded. They're simply less obstructed. And because they show up, they're heard. Meanwhile, those without the same financial cushion often face a stacked deck, silencing voices that most need representation. Education is one of the most powerful engines of political participation. The more education a person has, the more likely they are to vote. Education builds confidence in navigating political systems, understanding choices on the ballot, and feeling capable of making informed decisions. It places people in environments where civic engagement is normalized, where discussing politics is routine, and where not voting feels like stepping out of line. Education opens doors to information and networks that make participation natural, almost expected. Without it, citizens are left on the margins of political life, watching decisions being made about them rather than by them. With each level of schooling, citizens gain access to richer information networks, sharper critical thinking, and more confidence to navigate a complex democracy. Politically active social circles form on college campuses and in professional spaces where voting is simply assumed. Education makes political issues less abstract and more actionable. It connects policies to lived experiences in ways that build certainty about what's at stake. That certainty turns into action. It's why, across generations, the most educated Americans consistently show up to vote, and why educational gaps continue to create uneven participation in shaping our collective future. Listen, race and ethnicity have always been central to the story of American voting. For much of our history, non-white communities were systematically and systemically denied the right to vote. Even after landmark civil rights victories, barriers like voter suppression tactics, gerrymandering, and unequal access to polling places continued to dampen minority turnout. Yet despite these obstacles, communities of color have shown resilience and political power, often turning elections in pivotal states. While turnout gaps between white and minority voters have narrowed in recent decades, they persist. Understanding voting in America means acknowledging that race has always been a frontline battle over representation and power. Who gets to vote and how elections are conducted isn't one size fits all in America. The Constitution provides broad principles, but states control the mechanics. Who qualifies, when and where elections are held, and the procedures for casting and counting ballots. This patchwork system produces wide disparities in access to the ballot box. It is federalism in action. In one state, registration might be automatic. In another, it's a bureaucratic hurdle. Some states offer weeks of early voting, others just a single day. These rules are not just administrative details. They are levers of power that can open democracy to more voices or quietly close the door on millions of eligible citizens.
What's up, everybody? Miles Best here, host of Above the Noise, journalist with PBS, coming straight to you from Oakland, California. Now, let's talk about voting in the US. If you're a citizen and at least 18, you can vote in elections, period. End of story, right? Well, actually, no. If you've been convicted of a crime, it's possible that you could have that right taken away. We'll get into the details later on, but there are certain states that prevent a big chunk of people who did their time in prison from voting. Yeah. They got out, completed their parole or probation, all the stuff that they had to do, they did it, and still can't vote for years, or even for the rest of their lives. As you can probably imagine, there's a big debate around all of this. There's the ethics side. Is voting a right that you can't take away, or is it a privilege that you have to earn and maintain? And then there's the political side. If states change the laws and let people with criminal convictions vote, that means that there could be millions of new people hitting the polls, which could change who wins elections. So let's get into it and ask, should you lose the right to vote when you're convicted of a crime? All right, let's role play for a second. Say you're a criminal mastermind and we'll say forgery. You're passing out fake checks, you're printing fake money, even Costco cards and season passes to Disneyland. But then you're eventually caught because, your luck runs out and you're caught by the police. The prosecutor throws the book at you and you're sentenced to 5 years in prison. You do your time, you get out, and it just so happens to be an election year. And you think, hey, you know what? I want to do my civic duty and go vote. But here's the issue though. If your forgery career was in, say, Maine, you wouldn't have a problem. Being convicted of a crime there doesn't affect voting, like ever. In fact, people in prison can vote. Yes, they get ballots and can vote like everyone else. Now, if you did your forging in, say, Mississippi, then you have a problem. If you're convicted of certain crimes, you lose the right to vote permanently. And forgery is one of those crimes. And there are only two ways to get it back. One is to get the governor to personally restore your individual ability to vote. The other is to convince a state representative to author a bill restoring your vote. And as you can imagine, both options are really difficult. I mean, we all have the governor's number. Let's just all call him up. Hey, governor, please restore my right to vote because I'm not in jail anymore. When a state takes away your ability to vote because you've been convicted of a crime, it's called felony disenfranchisement. The word felony is in there because it usually applies to the felony class of crimes, which are more serious crimes that put people in prison for at least a year. So we're talking violent crimes like rape and murder. But some states also include non-violent crimes like bribery or lying under oath or even drug trafficking. Alabama has a whole list of like 50 felonies that they say involve moral turpitude that disqualifies you from voting. That sounds really bad. Turpitude. I had to look that up. And yes, it's terrible. Most states automatically restore the right to vote after people finish serving their sentences. But in some states, for certain crimes, you can permanently lose your right to vote. Okay, so we've got all these states, and they have different rules around how people with felony convictions can or can't vote. Some make it easy, some make it difficult. But why is that? How do we get here? There's not one reason, but most historians and experts who study this stuff trace it back to the end of slavery and the rise of Jim Crow laws in the South.
So we have to literally go back to the end of the Civil War.
That's Keisha Middlemass, an associate professor of political science at Howard University.
During that time, these state legislators rewrote their constitutions. And in that writing is they listed crimes that could be used to deny people the right to vote. And forgery was believed to be a Black crime, that Black people lie. This was the argument. Black people lie. They will forge their name on documents, and therefore they're committing moral turpitude against society and can be restricted from voting.
Today, laws restricting the vote for people convicted of a felony don't explicitly target Black folks, but versions of these laws are still on the books, and they do appear to affect Black people the most. According to a 2017 study, 1 out of every 13 Black Americans of voting age can't vote because of a felony conviction. That's 4 times greater than all other Americans. Okay, so you're probably wondering why some states still have felony disenfranchisement laws. Well, the argument you'll probably hear boils down to something like, if you can't follow the laws in your own life, why should you be trusted to help make laws for everyone else? Which is what you do when you vote. Do you really want a convicted murderer, even though they've served their sentence, to be able to vote for judges? Do you want people convicted of bribery or embezzlement to have a say in how governments spend money? Remember, people convicted of felonies often lose other rights, like serving on a jury, owning a gun, getting welfare payments, and receiving financial aid for college. Why should voting be any different? And what about the victims of these crimes? In Florida, people convicted of felonies have to pay court fees and any money owed to their victims before they can get their right to vote back.
If you were robbed and someone's convicted of taking, $3,000 out of your house and they were ordered to pay you $3,000 of restitution and they didn't do it, did they complete the sentence? We hardly ever talk about victims anymore in this country. And there are people that are victimized, by violent crimes in particular, who I think that we need to be standing up for.
And most states aren't saying that everyone convicted of a crime should never vote again. They're saying people who committed really bad crimes, the worst of the worst, shouldn't get their voting rights back automatically just because they finished their sentences. That's why some states require people to go through a formal process to get their voting rights back. It allows the state to look at each person on a case-to-case basis to figure out if they've truly left their criminal ways behind them. And there is some data to back up this point of view. A recent study followed over 400,000 people released from prison and found that 2 out of every 3 were arrested again within 3 years. And that cycle of committing a crime, getting out, and doing it again is called recidivism. It's a big problem in the US criminal justice system. Okay, so what do the American people think about all of this? Well, when they were asked, do you support or oppose restoring voting rights to people convicted of a felony after they've completed their sentence? 63% said they supported it. Only 20% were against it. For many, voting is a bedrock principle of what it means to be a democracy, meaning it's a right that shouldn't be taken away. If you've served your time and now you're out living in the world, you should get the right to vote, period. Many go even further, arguing that taking away the right is a political move designed to prevent people from voting, aka voter suppression. Check this out. In 2016, more than 6 million Americans were prohibited from voting because they had a felony conviction on their record. That included more than 20% of all potential black voters in Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Think about how politics could change if those 6 million people could vote.
So those that are eligible to vote would change overnight in some states. For instance, the state of Florida is controlled right now by a Republican governor, and Republican state legislators have the majority in the state House and the state Senate. But if everybody that was eligible to vote that had a felony conviction was able to then register and then cast a ballot, it could change who controls the state legislature. It could change who then controls the governorship.
Now, obviously, all black Americans don't vote the same way. But the general rule of thumb in politics is that black people usually vote for the Democratic Party. And it's been like that for a while. In fact, since 1968, no Republican presidential candidate has received more than 13% of the black vote. And black people are way overrepresented in prison. They make up 12% of the US population, but 33% of the prison population.
The fear of the Republicans is that because of the racial disparities in who is incarcerated, that if everybody who used to be incarcerated was actually allowed to vote, Republicans may start losing elections.
And if you look at the numbers, letting people with felony convictions vote means it would most likely help the Democrats and hurt the Republicans. That's why most of the states with the harshest felony disenfranchisement laws are considered red, meaning they're controlled by Republicans. Think about what a change to those laws could mean for those who win close elections. Just look at Florida. In 2018, Republican Rick Scott won his Senate seat by only 10,000 votes. In the 2000 presidential election, the Republican, George W. Bush, defeated the Democrat, Al Gore, by 537 votes. Yes, 537 votes. Winning Florida gave Bush the presidency. Now, people with felony convictions weren't allowed to vote in either of those elections. But what if they could? How many elections would have different outcomes because of it? So what do you think? Should people convicted of a felony be allowed to vote? Or is losing their vote fair punishment for violating the law? Let us know what you think. And if you want to learn more about voter suppression, check out our episode on that. Till next time, I'm Miles Best. Peace out.
Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a seismic shift in American democracy. Passed only 60 years ago, at the height of the civil rights movement, it tore down centuries-old barriers designed to silence Black Americans and other marginalized communities. Literacy tests, poll taxes, and countless other schemes to keep people from the ballot box were struck down. For the first time, states with a history of racial discrimination were forced to have any changes to their voting laws cleared by federal courts or the Department of Justice. But this cornerstone of voting rights has been chipped away over time, weakened by court decisions and state-level maneuvers.
Intimidation from the government is real, it is powerful. And it is because of the changing demographics in the nation. It is the fear of what this larger vote can mean.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy. Tonight is your answer.
Opponents of the Voting Rights Act seized on Barack Obama's election as a reason why the Voting Rights Act was no longer necessary. At the very moment that you see the ultimate progress, you see conservatives embracing that progress as a reason to try to get rid of the law that made Obama's election possible.
Barack Obama scared the bejeebers out of him. He brought 15 million new voters to the polls. This is what we should be celebrating. Bringing 15 million new people into this incredible civic society, engaged in this democracy, believing that they have a stake in this democracy, and getting out to vote. Instead, that Obama coalition becomes the hit list for voter suppression. How do we stop African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, the young, and the poor from voting? The Supreme Court decision, Shelby County v. Holder, allowed that to happen.
Shelby County, Alabama, there was an election there in which the districts were redrawn so that the only African-American city council member lost his race. Voter suppression and gerrymandering are two sides of the same coin. Efforts by politicians in power to try to manipulate the process to benefit themselves at the expense of others.
Gerrymandering is a real problem. It's the practice of drawing voting districts in a way that creates unfair advantages for whoever happens to be drawing the lines.
In the age of computers, you can gerrymander with scientific precision. You can run in and out of alleys and up and down streets and carefully include and exclude whichever voters you want in one district and not in another.
Shouldn't all of this be illegal? Well, that's complicated, because if you're gerrymandering to disadvantage minorities, yes, that is illegal under the Voting Rights Act. But if you're gerrymandering to disadvantage voters of an opposing party, that has generally been allowed.
Shelby County willfully violated federal law. They didn't bother to go up to the Department of Justice to check on whether it was okay as they were changing the voting boundaries as the Voting Rights Act required. When they got called on it, when they got sued, they said, we didn't do anything wrong. The era of racism is over.
What had been bipartisan before became extremely partisan after the election of Barack Obama. You know, people tend to forget that Republicans supported it. Every reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act was signed by a Republican president.
I think that democracy, if it's to work, then everybody that's eligible to be a voter should be registered and they should vote.
I am proud to sign the Voting Rights Act Reauthorization and Amendments Act of 2006.
Ronald Reagan called it the crown jewel of American democracy. But with every subsequent reauthorization, there's a legal challenge brought.
It's a seemingly coordinated strategy that we have seen waged by opponents to rip out the heart of the Voting Rights Act. It was almost a strategy of let's throw spaghetti against the wall and see which one sticks. The Shelby County case is the one that survived the lower courts and winded its way up to the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court hears a challenge to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Its detractors say the Voting Rights Act is out of date. Its defenders consider it a needed bulwark for justice.
The Voting Rights Act requires 9 states to get federal approval of changes to their election laws.
From a lawyer's point of view, this is a valid legal case. It could be honorably argued, and that's the business we're in. So we took the case.
We'll hear argument first this morning in case Shelby County versus Holder. Mr. Ryan?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. We argued that the Voting Rights Act was probably one of the deepest intrusions of the federal government into areas that states traditionally administered.
I think that really doesn't mask the need for equal treatment of the sovereign states.
I'm going to have a hard time with that. I think can't treat states the same because their problems are different, their populations are different, their needs are different, everything's different.
The non-covered states are worse in that regard than the non-covered states. Is that correct?
Justice Scalia,
every one of them is worse.
Justice Scalia, it's a fair question.
Not just a fair one, it's the crucial question.
The South has changed and made progress, but some things remain stubbornly the same, and the trained effort to deny African American voters the franchise is part of Alabama's history to this very day.
Have there been egregious episodes of the kind you're talking about in states that are not covered?
Absolutely, Chief Justice Roberts.
Well, then it doesn't seem to help you make the point that the differential treatment continues to be justified.
John Roberts had it out for the Voting Rights Act as far back as 1982. Early in his political career, it was John Roberts' job to try to prevent the Congress from reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act.
John Roberts, his mentor was William Rehnquist. This is why this lineage is so important, because he hated the Voting Rights Act.
I knew that this was an important act. I knew that it was doing important work, and I knew that it would be a disaster for the court to strike it down.
A controversial ruling today by the Supreme Court.
5-4, the U.S. Supreme Court took the teeth out of a law enacted nearly 50 years ago.
It invalidated a key part of the Voting Rights Act.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, joined by the 3 other liberal justices, said throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet.
I am deeply disappointed with the court's decision in this matter. This decision represents a serious setback for voting rights and has the potential to negatively affect millions of Americans across the country. I don't know if it's appropriate to say I was pissed off by what the court did. Thank you. It really struck home that this was a political decision that the court was making. Justice Ginsburg was correct. If you have an umbrella that keeps you dry in the middle of a thunderstorm, the fact that you're dry doesn't mean that you don't need the umbrella.
Every single one of those states that was covered previously by the Voting Rights Act was told, never mind, we think you're good now, go forth.
The floodgates literally opened in 2013 when the Supreme Court issued its ruling.
The passage of the Voting Rights Act was only the beginning of an ongoing struggle to protect the right to vote. In the decades that followed, federal oversight ensured that states with racist histories couldn't unilaterally change election laws to disenfranchise voters. For years, this safeguard stood as a shield against blatant suppression tactics. But slowly, that shield has been splintered. Through a series of court decisions and legislative rollbacks, the teeth of the Voting Rights Act have been dulled. The promise of 1965, a democracy that finally lived up to its ideals, has been eroded, reminding us that rights are never permanently secured. Even with the Voting Rights Act in place, the fight for ballot access never truly stopped. Decade after decade, new tactics emerged to sidestep its protections, from redistricting schemes to purging of voter rolls, from closure of polling places in certain communities to restrictive registration laws. Every step forward has been met with attempts to drag us backward. What 1965 promised was a living, breathing democracy. What we face today is proof that the struggle of voting rights is not a chapter in history, but an active, relentless battle being waged in courts, state legislatures, and on the ground in communities fighting to make sure their voices are not silenced again. Voter turnout tells us how healthy a democracy really is. And in America, the picture isn't flattering. Compared to many other democracies, participation here is consistently lower. Turnout is shaped by two metrics: voting age population, the VAT, which counts everyone old enough to vote, and voting eligible population, the VET, which excludes non-citizens and disenfranchised individuals. The gap between these numbers is significant, revealing just how many people are filtered out before they reach the ballot box. Beyond eligibility, turnout reflects mobilization. Campaigns, parties, and community networks play a crucial role in energizing citizens to show up. Without deliberate outreach and infrastructure, millions remain on the sideline, and elections reflect only a sliver of the nation's true voice.
Every election leaves a third of the country feeling like complete shit. But there's a large group of people who have immunized themselves against political disappointment. Their strategy is surprisingly effective.
I am choosing not to vote during this election.
Oh, I'm not voting for anyone.
I just don't want to play the politic game. I literally took the word political and I blocked it on all social media, so I don't have...
Did you for real?
Yes, I don't have no
on
clue.
your apps,
yes.
you blocked the word political?
Yes.
And these non-voters practice political abstinence for a range of reasons. Is there a reason you're not voting?
Not really into politicians like that. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
I just became really disgusted with the whole political process.
Yeah.
We waste way too much time and money and energy trying to get somebody in the White House.
Yeah.
When what we should be doing is focusing on our community.
Did you think about voting for your local election?
I don't think either of them are good leaders, in my opinion. One of them is definitely going to bring up more violence.
So one candidate leading to more violence didn't get you to vote?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just don't. No, it didn't.
Most people resented choosing between two candidates they didn't like, but this non-voter had the opposite problem.
I think either way, we have two great candidates. So it's like one is an accomplished attorney and then one is an accomplished business person, but I feel like we need both skills.
So if we had an attorney business person, then you would maybe vote for them?
Yes.
That makes sense. Yeah. Have you voted in past elections?
I have voted in past elections.
Okay, gotcha. And you're choosing not to vote in this election just because why?
I have literally detoxed myself from a lot of toxicity, which includes live television news and that kind of thing recently. When you think about the word toxicity, it's about digestion. And digestion comes from what we eat and consume, which also is what we see, what we hear.
So I'm honestly genuinely inspired, and I too want to learn how to get toxicity out. I mean, don't get this on camera. I've been having diarrhea for like weeks. So not voting could actually cure my diarrhea? But without politics, how could I meaningfully spend my time? So if you don't pay attention to politics, what kind of stuff do you follow?
Christianity and music.
What kind of stuff about Christianity do you follow? Just like updates on the Bible and stuff?
Yeah. I'm reading a lot of James Baldwin.
James Baldwin, humble brag.
I recommend all Americans read. That's the only thing that'll help make a better country.
Well, you're not voting though,
are in the
so
brain.
I feel like you can't really tell me how to be better. So what's your pitch to people who they don't want to worry about politics either? What do you say to them?
Stop giving a That's it.
Is that easy? So if you don't follow politics, what do you look at on your phone to get dopamine?
I look at chess videos.
Chess videos.
To inspire me.
I didn't know you liked chess.
I love chess.
I had no idea. Oh. Sorry, checkmate. I've never even played chess before. Sorry, loser, but winning isn't everything. The good news is, at least you'll get to play another game someday.
Turnout is built, cultivated, and fought for. High turnout is usually the product of strong mobilization efforts, campaigns knocking on doors, parties organizing rides to polling places, and civic groups reminding citizens that their voice matters. Without these pushes, participation plummets. And when fewer people vote, the system tilts towards those who already have power and privilege. It's not that millions of Americans don't care. It's that the structure of elections often leaves them unmoved or obstructed, making true representation a constant uphill battle. And the fuel behind turnout? Something called political efficacy. It's the belief that you understand the political system well enough to navigate it, and that your participation will make a difference. Internal efficacy is about confidence. You know the issues, you grasp the stakes, and you believe you can engage effectively. External efficacy is about trust, that you speak up, the government will hear and respond. When either of these break down, people stay home. Without efficacy, voting feels pointless, like shouting into the void. With it, citizens see their vote as a lever capable of moving power, even if just slightly. That perception is everything. Without it, democracy withers. Strong community ties, neighbors talking politics, church groups discussing upcoming elections, co-workers reminding each other to vote, create a culture where participation feels expected. When you're embedded in a network that values civic duty, skipping an election feels like breaking trust. But as community bonds weaken through isolation, economic stress, or declining civic organizations, that collective push fades. Without it, voting becomes a solitary act, easier to ignore. Turnout suffers. Democracy thrives when people feel linked to one another and responsible for shaping the shared future.
Hey, Lisa, do you know what social capital is?
Not much, Adam. What is social capital?
Social capital is the wealth you get from social connections that provide mutual benefit. It's like money, but measured through friends and acquaintances. Shared norms and values bring people together in a group or organization where they're able to cooperate and work towards a common purpose.
Oh, okay. Is there anything else I should know about social capital?
Well, there are two main types of social capital. The first type is bonding, which happens inside a community. It's about the connections between similar groups of people that share the same characteristics. The second type is bridging, which occurs between communities, groups, and organizations that bring people of different backgrounds together.
So, what is the difference between bonding and bridging?
The difference between bonding and bridging is that bonding occurs within a similar community, whereas bridging happens across social groups, classes, cultures, religions, and other categories.
How do bonding and bridging apply in real life?
I'll give you some examples. Neighbors have social capital when they borrow each other's garden tools. This is an example of bonding. Joining a soccer team helps you meet people outside your social group and form connections. This leads to mutual benefits and reciprocity that happen in the future. This is an example of bridging.
Ah, okay, I get it now. But why is it important?
Great question. We all benefit from having social capital. It gives us access to different people, ideas, and opportunities. It helps us get to the things we need and want faster. Say you lend your neighbor your lawnmower, and now you want to borrow their wheelbarrow to move some soil. You ask your neighbor and they lend it to you. This is called reciprocity. The exchange involves social interaction that strengthens the bond between neighbors and benefits everyone. With social capital, you can share information and resources, be helpful, and build trust.
Exactly how do I build my social capital?
You can do it at work, school, camp, with neighbors, your boss, or even random people on the street.
How can I do that?
The trick is to do more than talk and exchange business cards or contact information. It's about meeting different people to get introductions and build relationships. People who will help you achieve your goals and are willing to speak for you. Focus on people who support you, like friends and colleagues you already know, and new people you want to meet and have something in common with.
Oh, okay. I get it now. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot.
No problem. Anytime, Lisa.
Casting a ballot isn't a simple, rational calculation for most people. Voters rarely sit down with policy papers to weigh every option. Instead, decisions are shaped by identity, loyalty, gut feelings, and a handful of cues that simplify a complicated choice. Campaign messages, media coverage, conversations with friends and family, all of these swirl together to guide voters toward their decision. Ultimately, voting is less about policy precision and more about trust. Who you believe understands you, who you believe will fight for your interests, and who you believe deserves the power to lead. Strongest predictor of how someone will vote is their partisan identity. For most people, partisanship is like a standing decision. It doesn't shift easily and often functions as a shortcut in the voting booth. But policy still plays a role, just not in the meticulous way we imagine. Voters often rely on retrospective judgments, famously captured by Ronald Reagan's 1980 debate question. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? If life feels stable or improving, they're likely to stick with incumbents. If not, they lean towards change. Prospective voting, looking ahead to promised policy, also influences decisions, but for most, it's filtered through the lens of party loyalty. In the end, identity and experience weigh far more heavily than detailed policy analysis, shaping choices in ways that feel intuitive rather than calculated. Campaigns turn political theory into ground-level strategy. They're speeches and debates, but they're also relentless operations aimed at shaping perceptions and mobilizing turnout. Modern campaigns combine data analytics, targeted advertising, door-to-door canvassing, and digital outreach to reach voters where they live, work, and scroll. Consultants craft narratives, manage crises, and build coalitions, all to tip the balance in closely contested races. And because elections in the 21st century never really stop, campaigns stretch across years, defining political conversation long before and long after ballots are counted. They are, for better or worse, how democracy fights for attention in an age of noise and distraction. Campaigns often hinge on the idea that certain political parties or candidates are trusted more on specific issues. Republicans have long been viewed as stronger on defense and tax policy, while Democrats are often trusted more on healthcare and education. Back in the 90s, this was crudely summed up as Democrats owning the mommy issues, nurturing, caregiving, education, while Republicans own the daddy issues, protection, toughness, law and order. That framing still lingers today. It's why Democrats highlight reproductive health care and education, while Republicans hammer on immigration and crime. Each party wants to fight the campaign battle on its home turf. When you're the trusted brand on the issue voters care most about, you can go on the offensive, shaping the debate and defining what the election is really about. Money in politics flows through different channels, each shaping campaigns in distinct ways. Hard money is tightly regulated, given directly to candidates with strict limits on how much can be contributed and spent. Soft money, on the other hand, skirts direct candidate support. It's funneled into party organizations, advocacy groups, and political action committees to bankroll advertising, outreach, and issue campaigns without the same restrictions. The rise of super PACs blurred these lines even further, allowing vast sums to flood elections while claiming independence from candidates. Together, hard and soft money from a dual-track funding system that fuels modern campaigns ensures that in American politics, big spending isn't the exception, it is the rule. This raises a fundamental question that's lingered since the 1970s. Is money in politics a form of speech? Supreme Court rulings like Buckley versus Vallejo and Citizens United have increasingly tipped the balance towards saying yes, treating campaign spending as protected speech under the Constitution. It's a question that continues to shape every debate about campaign finance reform and the role of money in our politics.
I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited. I've earned every cent.
Money is speech.
The more speech, the better.
Money is speech.
I've earned every cent.
Money is speech.
The more speech, the better.
I don't like all the influence of money in politics.
When people think of Watergate, they think of a break-in, but they don't mention the money that Nixon was taking from wealthy donors to help him get re-elected. Nixon paid them back in favors just like they expected. To battle corruption, Congress passed a new law, capping contributions to a candidate's haul. The source of the donations had to be disclosed too, and the FEC was formed to enforce the new rules. Some who felt the law went against the Constitution sued, saying limits on money limited free speech too. So the courts kept the cap on how much you can donate, but said spending was unlimited by an outside group that meant no more spending limits to promote a cause or to point out a rival campaign's flaws. So while candidates will suck around with brown paper bags, from then on they raised money publicly or left it to PACs.
Money is speech.
The more speech, the better.
Money is speech.
I've earned every cent.
Money is speech.
The more speech, the better.
I don't like all the influence of money in politics.
We should also curb the role of big money in elections by capping the cost of campaigns. And we should also curb the role of big money in elections by capping the cost of campaigns.
Now in the 80s and 90s there was a new gimmick. Soft money that's disclosed but had no limits. It's supposed to cover each party's expenses, but guys like Clinton used it to help their election chances. There was just one problem, Clinton's party was broke, so he asked for more money every time he spoke. And in return for the $100 million cash in, he let donors use a Lincoln bedroom to crash in. Then the scandal and reform cycle happened again, and legislation was proposed by Feingold and McCain. It capped donations to parties, indexed soft funds, and banned corporate union issue ads right before elections. But with each new reform comes new loopholes. Tax exempt 527s arose because they weren't explicit about whom they supported. Many still raise money without limits to thwart them.
Money is speech.
The more speech, the better.
Money is speech.
I've earned every cent.
Money is speech.
The more speech, the better.
The rules are what they are.
I don't think by capping the cost of campaigns, and I don't think American elections should be bankrolled by America's most powerful interests.
But the most outside money was yet to be spent. Some argued spending limits broke the First Amendment. Corporations and unions are entitled to free speech. They took it to court, the Supreme Court agreed. Super PACs can raise as much money as they want. They can also use union and corporate funds. The only rule is that they cannot coordinate with a specific party or a specific candidate. But reform opponents were quite done, yet they found new uses for 501c4 nonprofits, which are a lot like super PACs with more mystery. They haven't had to disclose donors ever in history. Whether Republican or Democrat, you might believe that spending limits jeopardize the freedom of speech. But with each new cycle of deregulation, more money's being injected into our elections.
I don't think by capping the cost of campaigns.
You might be asking, well, where is all that money being spent? Well, actually, a lot of it goes to television ads and ads on social media. They remain one of the most potent tools in modern campaigns. They frame narratives and stir emotions and shape how voters perceive candidates. Positive ads introduce visions for the future, highlight achievements and attempt to build trust. Negative ads, while often criticized as nasty and underhanded, are undeniably effective at defining opponents and influencing undecided voters. In today's campaigns, ads are carefully crafted storytelling weapons, backed by millions in funding and guided by data to target specific demographics. Even in the era of social media, television continues to be a powerful battleground where elections are won or lost in 30-second bursts.
I for president, I for president, I for president, I for president. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John or Dean or Harry, let's do that big job right. Let's get in step with the guy that's hep, get in step with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We got to get where we are going, travel day and night for president. Let Adelaide go the other way, we'll all go with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington, we'll take Ike to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country. Vote for Eisenhower.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
It is time for an honest look at the problem of order in the United States. Dissent is a necessary ingredient of change. But in a system of government that provides for peaceful change, there is no cause that justifies resort to violence. Let us recognize that the first civil right of every American is to be free from domestic violence. So I pledge to you, we shall have order in the United States.
Hi, Governor Carter from Georgia. How you doing? Running for president. I want to ask you to help me next year.
In the beginning, Jimmy Carter's campaign was a lonely one. But through the months, more and more people recognized him as a new leader, a man who will change the way this country is run, a competent man who can make our government open and efficient, but above all, an understanding man who can make ours a government of the people once again. Jimmy Carter, a leader for a change.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
And let me say to you that I am honored to have been given the opportunity to stand up for the values and the interests of ordinary Americans. My job as president is to take care of the American people. And I have done my best to take good care of this country. We are safer, we are more secure, we are more prosperous. But in the end, what we stand for, the values we embrace and the things we fight for will shape the future that we will all live with. If we hold out our hands in cooperation, but always stand up for what we know is right, this country's future will be even brighter than its brilliant past. It is our responsibility to make that happen.
George W. Bush wants to bring his Texas ideas to Ohio. Manufacturing workers in Texas are the 8th worst paid in the nation. In Ohio, we're the 4th best paid. The Texas minimum wage is $3.35 an hour. 6 times Bush's inaction killed increases. $3.35 an hour. Under Bush, Texas went from 29th to the 48th worst place to raise a child. Bush even opposed providing health care for 220,000 more Texas children. On November 7th, is that the change we really want for Ohio?
If you have any question about what John Kerry's made of, just spend 3 minutes with the men who served with him 30 years.
I served with John Kerry. I served with John Kerry.
John Kerry has not been honest about what happened in Vietnam.
He is lying about his record.
I know John Kerry is lying about his first Purple Heart because I treated him for that injury.
John Kerry lied to get his Bronze Star. I know. I was there. I saw what happened.
His account of what happened and what actually happened are the difference between night and day.
John Kerry has not been honest.
And he lacks the capacity to lead.
When the chips were down, you could not count on John Kerry.
John Kerry is no war hero.
He betrayed all his shipmates. He lied before the Senate.
And John Kerry betrayed the men and women he served with in Vietnam.
He dishonored his country. He most certainly did.
I served with John Kerry. John Kerry cannot be trusted.
Swift Boat Veterans for Truth is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
He's the biggest celebrity in the world. But is he ready to lead? With gas prices soaring, Barack Obama says no to offshore drilling and says he'll raise taxes on electricity. Higher taxes, more foreign oil. That's the real Obama.
I'm John McCain, and I approve this message.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with broad.
Decades of lies, cover-ups, and scandal have finally caught up with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is under FBI investigation again after her emails were found on pervert Anthony Weiner's laptop. Think about that. America's most sensitive secrets, unlawfully sent, received, and exposed by Hillary Clinton, her staff, and Anthony Weiner. Hillary cannot lead a nation while crippled by a criminal investigation. Hillary Clinton, unfit to serve.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. And you can tell them to go themselves. I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible. When Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
You got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember.
Our children and grandchildren will look back at this time, at the choices we are about to make, the goals we will strive for, the principles we will live by, and we need to make sure that they can be proud of us.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
He took the train 4 hours every day so he could have breakfast with his boys in the morning and tuck them in at night. People in Washington didn't get why Joe Biden would travel all that way. But in neighborhoods all over this country, there's no distance parents won't go for their kids. Never underestimate the power of family or the sacrifices people will make for their children. That love, that hope, that determination, that's what fuels the American dream. It's why you stay up paying bills, sign up for that extra shift, worry about schools and health care. When Joe Biden traveled those 4 hours, he wasn't just going home for his kids. He was going to work for them too, just like he will for yours.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Trying to rain on the thunder. Tell the storm I'm new.
Something cracks open inside you when you become a mother. You realize long after you're gone, these children will be your legacy. This mother came to America at 19 years old. She stood 5 feet tall, but she stood tall. Becoming a cancer researcher, birthing 2 daughters, Kamala and Maya, and with them, she birthed her legacy. She taught them to believe in themselves and to stand up for others. It's what made Kamala become a prosecutor who fought for justice, an attorney general who took on corporations to protect working people, the senator and vice president who stood up for women's rights. And now, in this moment, Kamala Harris has a new way forward. She says every worker should be able to provide with dignity. That's your right. Every generation should do better than the last. That's your legacy. Every American should be able to buy a home, start a business, and save enough to invest. It's time for a new generation of leadership, one of optimism and belief in a better future for all Americans. This daughter of Shamala, this daughter of the American story, is ready to lead us forward.
To find out how much Americans know about their own government, we decided there was no better time than to hit the streets of the National Mall on the first significant snowfall that Washington, D.C. has seen in years. What is the Electoral College?
It's how we vote in America.
Their job is to collect all the votes from the 50 states.
And it's
like a group of people that basically have like the final decision.
If Billy Bob gets 200 votes and his brother doesn't get but 100, then Billy Bob gets the number of votes that state has for electoral votes.
I'm pretty sure it is added up by the representatives, the House seats, well, the House seats and then the Senate seats too, right? Or
you know what? I don't know.
Look, it's confusing, but I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the Electoral College. I'm Ben Sheehan, and this is Civics Made Easy. To start, how does the Electoral College work today? Step 1. Each political party in your state picks its slate of electors. People who pledge to vote for whoever wins their state. It's usually people in state government, party officials, even donors. And anyone can technically be an elector as long as you aren't in Congress or the executive branch and you haven't engaged in insurrection, rebellion, or treason, which, as of now, makes most of us eligible, but the day is young. As for the number of electors each state gets, it's equal to its total members of Congress. So, because Iowa has 2 senators and 4 members of the House, it gets 6 electors. So, each political party in Iowa picks its 6 electors and they wait. Step 2, Election Day. Whichever candidate wins your state, their party's electors become your state's electors. Step 3, those electors meet in your state capital on the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December, a normal way to describe time, and each cast 1 vote for president and 1 for vice president. After that, someone in your state, usually the governor or the secretary of state, certifies the electoral votes and sends them to the vice president in Washington, D.C. Step 4. On January 6th at 1 o'clock Eastern, the vice president opens and counts the electoral votes in front of the newly elected Congress. Whoever gets a majority, that's at least 270 out of 538 electoral votes, becomes the president, and the same goes for the vice president.
What happens if there's a tie in the Electoral College?
Then that's a funny situation. The vice president casts the tie-breaking vote.
I guess they restart, I think.
I don't know what happens if it's a tie. I would guess that they bring in somebody else.
If no one gets a majority of electoral votes, like a 269 to 269 tie, then the House picks the president and the Senate picks the vice president. The House votes by state, where you need 26 out of 50 to win, and the Senate votes by senator, where you need 51 out of 100. By the way, the authors of the Constitution thought the House would end up choosing the president almost every time. Turns out that's happened twice. In 1800 with Thomas Jefferson and in 1824 with John Quincy Adams. And the Senate has only picked the vice president once, in 1836 with Richard Johnson. And finally, step 5. After the winners are announced, the new president and new vice president are sworn in on January 20th at noon Eastern. And as soon as that happens, their terms begin. To better understand what this process actually looks like, we're meeting with Colleen Shogan, the former archivist of the United States, who was responsible for looking after both the certificates of the electors and their electoral votes in the 2024 election. Can I hold the Constitution, and how often do people ask you that?
Unfortunately, not even I am allowed to hold the Constitution of the United States.
So we're filming this, and just a couple days ago, the process of certification of the electoral votes actually happened, and that's a sort of a drawn-out process over a few weeks or months. Can you kind of walk us through that process?
We received 2 sets of certificates. One is a certificate of the electors, and then we receive another set of certificates which actually outline the votes from that state, the Electoral College votes for the state.
A few days later, you bring them to Congress for them to be counted. You bring them to the vice president. How does the transfer work?
We actually, those are our copies that we keep here at the National Archives, but there's separate copies that are sent to Congress for counting.
Dr. Shogan, what do electoral votes actually look like?
The states actually keep the votes, the actual electoral votes that the electors cast, but we have the certificates of votes, which tells the vote tally for every individual state. And they're very formal-looking documents. You can look at them online at archives.gov. We have all of them available if you'd like to take a look.
I would, and I'd also like to know who you think has the best looking certificate.
I would not be, I'm sorry, I'm not able to state that.
This brings us to, why do we have the Electoral College? To start, we're going back to 87. 1787. At the Constitutional Convention, seen in this public domain painting, the delegates spent 21 days arguing over how to pick the president, but could not agree. So, just before they all left Philadelphia, a few delegates suggested the Electoral College. Not a school, just a group of people. And this Electoral College combined 3 ideas that had been proposed to try to please everyone. And speaking of pleasing everyone, because this next part is dense, while I explain, I'm gonna hold this puppy. The first idea was Congress would pick the president. But some delegates thought states with more Congress people would have too much say, or that Congress could corrupt the president. So the compromise was electors, a group of people whose only job is to vote for president, would choose instead. And if no candidate got more than half of those electoral votes, the House would pick, as in Congress. I think he needs to go outside. The The second idea was that state legislatures would pick. These are people who write your state's laws. And the final idea was a national popular vote. So how did we get from this combination of rejected ideas to what we have now? The election of 1824.
Imagine a candidate getting the most popular votes and the most electoral votes and losing.
Well, you don't have to, because that's what happened to Andrew Jackson. In 1824, he got the most electoral votes, but not a majority. And when no one gets a majority, the House chooses the president, and they went with John Quincy Adams. Jackson was not pleased, so he did something. Before he ran again 4 years later, Jackson persuaded a bunch of states to change their approach to the Electoral College. Instead of politicians choosing the electors, voters would cast ballots for president. Whichever candidate wins, their political party's electors will vote for that candidate when the Electoral College meets. In other words, we the people suddenly had way more power to choose the president. As a result, Jackson won that election and his re-election by a landslide. You now know why we have the Electoral College and how it works. And like everything else in government, some people like it and others really don't.
I think it's unfair.
I'm indifferent on it.
Our forefathers put this in place a long time ago, and it worked then, and I think it can work now.
Those who like the Electoral College say it forces candidates to appeal to different voters in a variety of states. And if the presidency were a popular vote, it would just shift the voting power to the biggest cities. Electoral College stands also say it makes it harder to hack our elections because it's a decentralized system with multiple stages of voting and vote counting. And for less populous states, it gives them a seat at the table. Because each state gets at least 3 electoral votes regardless of its size, that means your vote for president can have different power depending on your state. For example, Wyoming has 1 electoral vote for every 195,000 people, while Texas has 1 for every 760,000 people. It's also true that swing states benefit from the Electoral College. In the 2020 election, 96% of campaign spending was on the 12 most competitive states, on hotels, restaurants, transportation, and of course TV ads. And if we had a national popular vote, that money would likely go, again, to the largest cities. But those who don't like the Electoral College point out that, with a national popular vote, your vote has the same weight no matter which state you're in. They also note that, in many states, the electors don't have to vote how their state votes. Of course, the odds of electors who are party loyalists voting differently are slim, but it has happened. In 2016, there were 10 faithless electors who didn't vote for the winner of their state, the most ever besides 1872. And while it's never changed the outcome of an election, in a close one it could. And lastly, Electoral College skeptics point out that, thanks to this system, the person who got the most popular votes has lost the election 5 times. Andrew Jackson in 1824, Samuel Tilden in 1876, Grover Cleveland in 1888, Al Gore in 2000, and Hillary Clinton in 2016. This is all to say that if you like the Electoral College, you're in luck. It's what we have. But if you don't, and according to Pew Research that's 2 out of 3 Americans, there are really 4 ways to change it. One is a constitutional amendment. There have been more than 700 introduced in Congress to abolish the Electoral College, but obviously none prevailed. A second way is by increasing the number of representatives in the House. Since 1929, the number has been capped at 435. But increasing the amount of representatives would increase the number of electoral votes, and it would create slightly less of an imbalance between someone's vote for president in one state versus another. A third is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which just rolls off the tongue. It's an agreement where states promise to give their electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote, not the winner of their state. As of this taping, 17 states and DC have signed it, with a total of 209 electoral votes between them. And lastly, any state could undo the work of Andrew Jackson and award its electoral votes proportionally instead of winner-take-all. Today, 48 states and DC give all their electoral votes to the winner of the state. But if states went proportional, that would make the electoral vote more closely match the popular vote. 2 states kind of do this, Maine and Nebraska, where the winner of the state gets 2 electoral votes and the winner of each congressional district gets 1. But there's one more thing you should know about the Electoral College. At the Constitutional Convention, part of why it took so long to figure out how to pick the president was slavery. You see, slave states didn't want a popular vote because they had fewer voters, and enslaved people couldn't vote. But the Electoral College addressed this. See, in the census, we used to count an enslaved person as 3/5 of a person. That means slave states got additional members of the House and thus additional electoral votes just for having enslaved people. This was one of the many compromises to get slave states to sign the Constitution. Early on, Virginia and Pennsylvania had about the same number of free people.
But thanks to Virginia's huge enslaved population, it got 6 extra electoral votes, which is probably why 4 of our first 5 presidents were slave owners from Virginia.
So with that in mind, what do you think? Should we keep the Electoral College as is, change it, or get rid of it entirely? Comment below with your thoughts, and I hope you learned something. For more episodes of Civics Made Easy, subscribe to the PBS YouTube channel. You can also DM me anytime on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. I promise there are no stupid questions.
The business of voting, campaigns, and elections are messy, imperfect, and endlessly contested in modern America. They are shaped by age, income, education, race, laws, and the shifting balance of power between access and suppression. Money and media saturate campaigns. Consultants script narratives, and ads bombard us from every screen. It's easy to feel that our votes are drowned out, that participation is futile. But despite the noise, despite the obstacles, voting remains the sharpest tool you have to challenge power and shape the nation's future. You stand at the front edge of change. This system may not have been designed with you in mind, but it cannot ignore you if you show up. Democracy requires your voice, your presence, and your willingness to claim power that will not be handed to you freely. Believe. Every ballot cast is a demand to be counted, to be heard, and have a stake in what comes next. Don't surrender that fight. Step into it and make it yours.